Hello humans! Today I wanted to talk about this little guy right here. So I recently went to my local hunting supply store, which I feel like I say that quite a bit, but I like this hunting supply store and I like the guy who runs it. So I went in and I picked up a couple of new buck knives because their new order had just come in. So real quick, classic buck packaging. It's a simple cardboard box, Proposition 65 warning. This one's one of the nicer ones. It does tell me which element is going to give me cancer, but it doesn't tell me how dangerous it is. So nickel, known in the state of California to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harms. Okay. Buck is not responsible if you get arrested for carrying a knife. This is the Buck Knives hexam. So we have our traditional dog poo bag. Let's take it out of there, and here we go. So this is the Buck 261 hexam. So one of the things that really sort of interests me about this knife is it's actually locked right now. Like, I can't open it, I can't use this top flipper, I can't use the back flipper until I slide back this little tab right here on the side. Then I can fire out the knife. And then it locks again, uses the same system to close. So as a result, I can actually, it's still one hand open, it's still very fidget friendly, right? You have that sort of upper. The only thing is you can't top flip it really because you need to be able to keep this pushed down. You can do your centrifugal force flicks. And once you pull this back, it's sort of free floating, so there's no detent or anything like that to overcome. So it really is just based off of how quickly you can flick it. Oh, that's nice. Alrighty. So we have some type of plastic handles with a rubberized inset right there, and full-length steel liners. Unfortunately, the pocket clip is one position. It's curved to meet the shape of the blade, which I think is aesthetically a nice choice, but I do wish it was a two-position pocket clip, even though this is like a surprisingly one-sided slide lock. Like, you don't see them super often where the slide lock itself is actually right-hand biased, which I think is interesting. Other thing that I think is pretty neat about it is that it has a top flipper that you can't use with your thumb. Actually, hold on. Unless maybe you're left-handed. This is actually, it's not super easy to do left-handed either. The trick that I'm finding with my left hand is to use my middle finger to push this down, and then at least I have space to flick it and let go. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not great. For the right hand, though, I kind of hope that they do make a left-hand version of this, because this is a really fun knife to play with, specifically like as a righty. And I think a left-handed version would do quite well with left-handed people. You have sort of this dropped section right here for a little bit of aesthetic flair. It makes a nice spot to put your thumb when you're cutting or anything like that. And because you have this section to put your finger, but there's no choil or anything that protects your finger from just sliding right into the blade, or no finger choil, there's a slight choil there, to protect your finger from just sliding into the blade, this isn't somewhere where I'd recommend putting your finger. And having this sort of detent that fits my thumb quite naturally, this is actually a pretty nice position to sit in. You've got sort of a saber height that's absolutely a hollow grind. Yeah, hollow grind on this like reverse tontoed straight clip point sort of blade. I'm going to call that a reverse tonto, I think. It is like a very small little section, and it has this massive swedge. Like, it's aesthetically, this knife is an absolute choice. There is a black on black version of it instead of this sort of black and blue and orange version. But this looked more visually interesting, so I was more visually interested in it. Well, it is a little bit trickier. Like, you can't flick it in a downward position. It really has to be either flat or like upright. You can flick it quite nicely. Flat, you can flick it quite nicely. But if it's like pointed downwards, you just pull this back and try and let go when the blade hits its end. Another neat trick that I quite like is having its number. So I generally do like what Buck does with branding. Sometimes they are a little bit overboard, you know, planting Buck big on the blade like that. I do wish they'd done it a little bit more subtly, but I don't mind it as much. And then putting the model number really, really small on the flipper tab, I quite like. I wish they'd put the steel somewhere. I am going to have to look into what steel this is, which I'm going to update. I have a channel update at the end of this section that I'm going to get into. But this lock is definitely interesting. I haven't played with anything. It's not dissimilar to a crossbar lock, but it's not quite similar to one either. It's interesting. I like it. It's like halfway between a button and a crossbar lock would be the way that I describe it. Another interesting visual flair that I quite like is having the hollowed out flipper tab. I think that on a knife with this much different visual tricks and flares and having the cutout and the weird slide thing and like this angling right here to serve as a thumb ramp, I think having the hollowed out flipper tab just suits it so well. And in the same extension, I think that having this like weird sawtooth jig, I guess, jimping, I guess, is part of that choice. Like it's deep, shallow, but it sort of cuts them out into like little 2 bump segments, which I think is neat. And it disappears when the blade's out, which is pretty cool. This doesn't feel like a particularly heavy knife. It's not super light, but doesn't feel particularly heavy. The pocket clip, it's a simple bent clip. Feels like it has good retention. The bill comes up. It's a little bit sharp. Yeah, like when I squeeze down, I am feeling it a little bit, but it's not too bad overall. And like, obviously gotta be riding on bearings. It feels really nice. It has really, really satisfying clicky sounds to it. There's a hidden, what's it called? Backstop or whatever they're called. Stop pin. There's a hidden stop pin back here in the pivot, and it's just ringing super, super nicely when I play with this knife, which I quite like. The button is nicely ramped to scoop into the thumb, which makes this, it's just a really, really nice feel. The blade shape has a lot of belly, has a very, very small straight section, which I like having that combination. I wish the straight section was a little bit longer, but visually it makes a nice little flare. And then that slight, you know, reverse Tonto clip thing means that if you're the type of person who cuts lots of straps, stuff like that, you can put the knife flat underneath something and then pry up very easily, which is quite nice. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a couple days and I'm going to play with the knife, use it a little bit, give my thoughts, and then I'm going to do the second part of this, which is going to include the size comparisons, the blade steel, and what I think about it after a little bit of use. The only remaining thing for me to do today is test its factory edge. So, back flick. Let's give this guy right here a try. Yeah, it's a very, very typical Buck feeling factory edge. It's nice, it's consistent and sharp. It's not like an absolute razor blade that's gonna cut through everything, but especially at, you know, 65, 68 Canadian bucks, there is nothing to complain about. 68 Canadian bucks puts this very, very comfortably into what I consider to be budget territory. But for now, I'm going to get back to you guys in a few days and tell you what I think about using it. And we are back. It's been a little bit over a week. I've been playing with this guy pretty much exclusively now. And honestly, playing with is kind of the right word to use. This thing absolutely became more of a fidget toy than anything else. So I did do my specs research. It is a 7CR blade, hollow grind, which fairly easy to note right off the bat, with injection molded handles and quote-unquote rubberized inserts, whatever that happens to mean. And the lock mechanism is referred to as the spin-safe lock, whatever that happens to mean. It's not a lock that Buck has used very often. They seem to have had it since in and around 2011, 2012 was the earliest references to it that I have been capable of finding. and they've used it very, very sparingly since then. You should be seeing a couple of examples on screen now of Buck having used this in the past, and I don't actually know how it works. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull this guy apart right now and see what makes it tick. So let me just grab my screwdriver. Did I lose the actual screwdriver? No, there it is. And let's try a T to start with. Just gonna open this guy right here up and see what it is. So pivot, definitely a T8. Body screws are gonna be a T6. It's a little unfortunate, but what do you expect? Okay, so there's our pivot. And please tell me these are captive pivots. Or captive body screws, I should say. They do kind of feel captive. I feel like I'm unscrewing. Am I though? No. God damn it. Just in a pinch, doesn't always work, but if you just push your thumb up against the back of a non-captive screw set, sometimes it'll undo. Oh, there's some Loctite in there. That might have also been helping with it not working very well. It does obviously have pivots. Sorry. Oh, don't strip, don't strip, don't strip, don't strip. It didn't strip. Oh, maybe it is stripping. This is why everybody hates T6s, because the bit that's stripping is not necessarily the inside of the bolt. It can also be the bit with these little tiny bits like that. Not my preferred way of doing this, disassembled, but I'll live. Alright, so that should be enough for us just to take this full side off. As you can see, full length steel liner. And we've got, wow, it got dirty in that week. Oh, they're there. Okay. Right here, you can see our D-shaped barrel and also our bearings. Yes, I kept forgetting the word for bearings. And as you can see there on the inside, we have our, oh, that's our lock bar. Oh, okay, so that's how that works. Okay. Let me just disassemble it one more piece. And then up here, I'm assuming that is our stop pin. Pull back on this. Yes, I'm playing with it with half the knife disassembled. Okay. So like that. Yeah, so that's our stop pin then. And when it's not locked, should be able to just take the blade out like that. As you can see, nothing super, super interesting. Fork. Okay. I gotta be very, very careful, both not to lose, but also not to super, super dirty. All right. So, so that's what I was hoping to avoid doing. Didn't lose any of its little balls. Okay. So that lets me take out the other side of my pivot. And I'm going to have to take you out. So again, T6. Please work. Please don't spin on me. Tweezers or something like that. I don't think I've got tweezers or something like that immediately on me in order to help me grab this. So, because I can't grab this without it just spinning on me. Oh. No. All right. I'll be back in 1 second. Back again with RoboGrips. I'm hoping this might end up scratching this up, and this probably avoids my warranty, but whatever, we'll live. It's clearly spinning the RoboGrips as well. Damn it. Really hoping to avoid this. I don't know why disassembly is being so hard right now, but it is. Now we're talking. All right. That was a lot harder than it, strictly speaking, needed to be. And now here we are. Trying not to lose all our pieces. So here's the other side liner. And then underneath said liner, we can see our actual lock mechanism. So, wow, that is very lubricated. Here's how the actual lock mechanism itself seems to work. We have this lock right here, which fits into either one of these two indents, very, very similarly to how a traditional button lock would work, except instead of a plunge sliding upwards in, we have a bar that slides horizontally in. And it's just powered by that little slide right there, which is just overmolded and then pressed in place by the looks of it. All right, so now this goes back in there. And this whole thing just works based off the tension of this spring back here. So you can see this very, very tiny pocket right here is cut out for this spring to fit in. Come on. Which means that very, very realistically, our there we are. Our liner here is what's actually helping keep dirt and debris out of our lock. Something else that's interesting is, because this is very, very strictly a right-handed lock, right? Like this is extraordinarily biased towards right-handed people. That's not to say that left-handed people are incapable of using this lock, but it is significantly more difficult than it needs to be for left-handed people. I also just had the realization I'm going to have to find another T6. Yay. I'll do that in a minute. But that is no, like, it's a finger safe lock, right? Like, it's a super cool operating finger safe lock. It's not dissimilar to things I've seen before, but it's not super similar to things I've seen before either. There's a comparison some people are going to get really annoyed with, but it's a lock type that you see on some of those Serge Panchenko or it's not operated dissimilarly to that lock that you see on some Serge Panchenko and Hawk Knives collaborations of late. So it's definitely a cool idea, and I would like to see it on something a little bit higher end. That's actually going to be part of my conclusions, I think, because I have opinions. And they're mostly positive. I actually really did enjoy carrying this knife. I found it a lot of fun to carry. It's not necessarily the best knife in the types of environments that I work in and go to school in, but on days off, like, and especially for the drive, like having something like this, which it's fidget friendly in a way that is dissimilar to a lot of other knives. And what I mean by that is it is very, very fidget friendly. But because of the fact that there's no detent or nothing acting like the detent, there's no pressure to overcome. So in like a traditional flippered knife, you have got something that acts like the detent that you overcome, and then that throws the blade out. Whereas with this guy right here, it's just free spinning. You get the lock out of the way, and then you just sort of swing it around and do whatever you want with at that point. which is a very, very different tactile experience, and one that I really enjoyed and to a non-zero degree actually preferred over over a lot of other knives just to play with, like as purely as a fidget toy, not as a knife necessarily. It's a lot less satisfying to flick it out when you're using it as a knife as a result, but it's nothing like the Milwaukee Fastback with the lock mechanism and that whole shebang. Like, that's not a very fun knife to flick out. It's a very dramatic knife to flick out, but it's not tons of fun to flick out. This guy right here is not tons of fun to flick out, but it's tons of fun to flick, and it's not very dramatic. So it's not... It's a different experience. Why, oh why do you want to work like this? Are you cross-threaded on this side then? Is that what the problem is? Maybe you're just spinning. Such fun. So yeah, over my week of carry, I didn't notice anything in particular getting inside of the internals at all, which I was quite worried about. The amount of grease that is inside of the locking mechanism from factory, though, was absolutely brutal. And, like, I'd noticed it on my hands when I was in school and stuff like that, which is a little bit annoying, but not exactly game-ending by any stretch of the imagination. So, different. Different is probably the word I would like to use to describe this knife. It's not bad, it's not unpleasant, it's just very, very different from other knives in my collection, to the point where when I think about it, I almost think about it like as two different knives. Oh wow, that's like, I don't know. Let me see if I need to do any centering on it, because like I just tightened it down without thought and figured I'd center it later, but just putting it back together seems to have centered it. The body obviously isn't tight yet, so that could be part of what's making it seem centered right out the gate, but it feels centered right out the gate, which is different. Do I have another T6? Probably not on me. T7 security, that's not what I'm looking for. T4, T3. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my other T6. There. It's you, right? Okay. So, yeah, I never felt like I was lacking using this knife. There were definitely times when I felt a little bit weird using it. It didn't feel quite like what I wanted in that moment, because it didn't quite feel as much like a knife as I would have perhaps wanted in that moment. But I'm not angry about it or anything. You're not a T6. What are you? Didn't seem to have stripped that. Yeah, you're definitely not stripped. Alright. We're gonna pretend that that's not the case for immediately now, and it's gonna get fixed after I am done talking about this knife otherwise. Okay. Okay. I haven't taken it apart yet, obviously. So when you over tighten the pivot, it actually gets pretty stiff. So I'm just gonna back that off just a hair. And we're gonna see if it stays centered. Okay, so that's tight, but not like locked. There we go. That's more similar to how it has been. There's been like absolutely no blade play. There's a little bit right now. Oh, I'm bleeding. I seem to have cut myself when I picked up the blade earlier, and I did not notice. So now there's blood on my knife. Foremost apologies. Not entirely sure when that happened, but it seems to have. Oh, and there's some blood on the blade too. Yay. Blood on the blade too. Ultra non-professional right here, ladies and gentlemen. Having so much fun. Okay. Just tighten that up just a hair. Yeah, okay, that's where we were. And I noticed no blade play throughout the week. I noticed no issues with this knife throughout the week. That looks so bad. Just don't go like that. I've been, like I said, I have been using it for about a week. My only real big issue is with how tall the grind is. So when I did decide to do a little bit of wood carving with it, this very, very short hollow grind meant that like a longer cut, it tended to get stuck really easily. There wasn't a gradual enough transition. It would should just shoulder right here where it ended, and it would get stuck on occasion, especially if I was cutting through a tougher material. Like on occasion when I was cutting through wood, when I was doing long cuts through wood, it would end up getting stuck, which frustrated me a little bit, but wasn't all that bad. And the other thing that kind of annoyed me throughout the week was these rubberized handle sections. They just get so dirty. Like you can see, I mean, you'll be able to see direct comparison, right? Beginning of the week versus now, just how dirty these things have gotten. The actual hard plastic is holding up very, very well, but the softer rubber stuff just absolutely got dirty, which is a little, it's to be expected, but I would have liked something that's a little bit easier to clean. I tried cleaning it with just some water and paper towel, and it just wouldn't quite get out of there. I'm thinking isopropyl alcohol or something like that might do a better job, but it's just a little bit unfortunate. Super fun to play with. It held its edge fine for 7CR, which 7CR at this price point, I'm generally not happy with. It's not brutal, but I'm not happy with it necessarily. But there's enough different going on here that I'm actually pretty okay with it, specifically in this locking mechanism. I am always going to be willing to pay a little bit more than I normally would for an interesting locking mechanism. And while this is sort of pushing me, I'd like to see it, you know, $7, $8 cheaper or $5 more expensive with D2 blade steel, or another like up 14C blade steel for $15 more, somewhere along those lines there, where I would pay a little bit more and get an upgraded blade steel, or I'd pay a little bit less and get the same blade steel. But with this interesting lock, I'm actually completely happy with the price tag. The pocket clip is really nice compared to some of the other buck pocket clips that I've experienced recently, especially like in use. It fits really nicely in a part of my hand where I do not notice it at all. Even like in a reverse cut, my pinky actually fits in it and the rest of my fingers go over it, so I'm not noticing it in any hand positions, which is really, really nice. Like that's what I want out of a pocket clip. And then it never caught on anything. It just sat in my pocket. There's no bill for stuff to get caught on. It does swoop up nicely, so it's super easy getting it in and out of my pocket. The only thing I'm not tons of happy with is how tall it stands. But like, honestly, this pocket clip has made me the most happy out of, I don't want to say any buck pocket clip I've experienced, but this is a step above most buck pocket clips I have experienced, especially in the last couple years. Possibly since my 311, to be honest. It's a Chinese-made buck. I mean, at this price point, a lot of things are. I would have liked to see T8 body screws. Just a general rule, T6s are awful. Everybody in the knife community knows this. And I want to see an upgraded version of this so bad. Even, like, it doesn't have to be this exact design. Give me something with a clip point or a more traditional drop point or whatever you want to do. Something with this lock, give me G10 with micarta inlays or wood with micarta inlays. Something like a natural micarta with like desert ironwood. Give me 14C28N, desert ironwood, micarta inlays. Charge me, you know, 100 Canadian bucks for it, and I'm a happy, happy man. I'm going to be keeping my eye out for more upgraded versions of this lock in particular. I'm going to be following this lock's career. I love this lock. It's a fidget toy. It's so mechanical feeling. Click, click. Like, even compared to most of the other quote-unquote fidget-friendly knives that I own, right? Like my Kershaw Iridium, great knife, super, super fun to play with, very, very fidget-friendly, but like, and don't get me wrong, this is amazing, it feels great, super, but I feel like I'm playing with a knife. Not a bad thing, often a good thing. With this, I feel like I'm playing with a fidget toy. It's mechanical noises, it's clinks, it's thunks, it's weights getting thrown around a little bit. It's super nice. Where's the balance on this? The balance is pretty much right where you'd want it, which surprises me a little, especially when you're opening it. Because there's nothing slowing the blade down or anything like that. Like it's completely in free fall, right? It's difficult to show with an upward camera, but you can see it's completely in free fall there. It's very, very mechanical, so it throws your hand back just a little bit. There's absolutely no way to use this as a front flipper with your thumb. Left hand, right hand, like I haven't managed to find a way to do it. Like I can't even cat's claw it and get around my fingers with it, which not the end of the world, but a little bit annoying. Yeah. Held its edge fairly well. I mean, Buck's got an amazing heat treat for every metal that I've ever tried with Buck. I've always enjoyed their heat treat. I feel like they've done a good job with all of it. I would have liked to see a better steel. Let's do some quick size comparisons. Here it is next to the Wii Banter. As you can see, it is quite a bit bigger than the Wii Banter. I mean, it's not a small knife, and it doesn't behave like a small knife. Here it is next to this VV Chevalier. Again, you know, it's a good deal longer than this VV Chevalier. And here it is next to its more famous older brother, the Buck 110, and it's pretty much the same size as the Buck 110, like almost to a T. It's going to have a little bit more edge than the Buck 110 just with the amount of belly that it has, but that's about it in terms of differences as far as like blade uses. And I mean, you can take it apart and service it, which is a huge difference. Here it is next to a Zippo, right? Gives you a rough idea of its height and dimensions like that. This is definitely on the upper end of a medium-sized knife. What I would actually argue is the absolute top end of a medium-sized knife in terms of thickness. Oh yeah, it's also contoured, in case I haven't mentioned that, which is probably aiding in its feel. It is not tons thicker than the Buck 110, but it is quite a bit thinner than the Buck 110. Not thicker, thinner than the Buck 110. And next to a Zippo, it's a little bit thicker than a Zippo. Like, it's right around the same thickness as a Zippo at the pivot, which is nice. Yeah, super fun fidget toy. I absolutely love this guy. For 65 Canadian bucks, I jump all over it. Amazing. The blade shape feels really, really good. I would have liked a little bit more flat than I got. Something I just noticed in push cuts and stuff like that, but by no means the end of the world. And I want an upgraded version of this very, very badly. I'm gonna go try and fix or finish screwing in this screw, which means I need to go find my other T6. I don't use T6s very often. This is gonna be fun. Stay safe and have fun out there.